So, Ryan, let's get this kicked off. So, how about just some basics of the conference? Where was it? Who was hosting it? What big players were there? What was the conference?
Yeah, so the Gartner Data and Analytics Conference, I think most of you watching probably understand what Gartner is, but for those of you who don't, it is like the major research firm kind of in the enterprise IT and technology space, right? So they put out all these reports. You're probably familiar with their Magic Quadrants that kind of give you the top vendors and how they're positioned and that sort of thing. And the conference itself was in Orlando. It was my first time ever going to Orlando. And, as someone who's in the Detroit area, going down to Orlando in March is awesome because the weather here is terrible this time of year. So I had a really good time. And as far as who was there, it was an interesting mix of enterprise players in analytics and BI. So your IBMs, your Oracles, your SAPs, Microsoft, Tableau, Click, right? The big players, but also a lot of really interesting people in the startup space, especially in kind of the emerging data catalog, semantic layer, which is something that we're going to be talking about over the course of the show, I'm sure. But so it was a good mix of kind of startup and enterprise, and a really interesting mix of people. And then, of course, Gartner, a big part of the conference is just Gartner delivering their take on where things are going, what you should be focused on at the enterprise analytics, data and analytics level. And so I went to a lot of those sessions, and I'm going to try to condense that down for you today.
Nice. So now, so you talked about the Gartner conference. So like, was there like an overarching theme, or like, basically like every conference, we went to Think in 20 whatever. And like that was the year the theme was blockchain. It turned out not being very influential in the long run, but that was the theme. Everyone kept saying blockchain at the Gartner conference. Like, what was the word on everyone's lips? What was there a new buzzword? Was there anything coming up at the Gartner conference that maybe you heard for the first time, or just is kind of new that in the next year everyone's going to be hearing?
Yeah, it was interesting this year. There wasn't like what I would say a surprising theme. But what was interesting about it is, you and I went to the Day-to-Day Texas conference in January, and it was two very different audiences, right? Day-to-Day Texas is like startup scene, small, medium-sized startups and people who work in the tech industry. Gartner is much more kind of cross-industry, very large enterprises. But at both conferences, there was this kind of feeling of a lack of ROI for data, right? And just like, how do we show the value of data, of our data projects, and a feeling that like we haven't been able to do that, right? And so I wasn't surprised to hear that at Gartner necessarily, but that was probably the overarching theme, was like, how do you as a data practice show that what you're building is actually valuable? And I grabbed a couple slides from the Gartner presentations, as you can see here. But it was really, I think that's a result of like people. There's kind of some economic storm clouds on the horizon. People are worried that there's a recession coming, or maybe we're in one. I see that debated in general. But that was really, I think, what's driving it. And the other thing I would say is, we've talked about this on the show before, the supply chain era of analytics, which, if you haven't seen us talk about that, is like the idea that you're doing all this work, building all these pipelines, all this stuff, and then you're going to just throw a viz tool on top of like a view, and that's going to drive your executive dashboard, and then like you'll make another view for your supply chain operations dashboard, and we call that here the supply chain of analytics. And it's just kind of a sense of like that era is ending and something new is coming for business intelligence and analytics. There was definitely a feeling of that at the conference.
So I imagine, were there lots of vendors at the conference saying, we are in fact the new thing?
Yeah. I mean, and I think there was, obviously every vendor is there ultimately to find new prospects and do, right? And make money. That's why they exist, right? We live in capitalist society, and so these vendors are not charities.
No.
But I think there actually is an emerging set of capabilities that were represented there. Like cool new vendors that are doing new things or new takes on old things. That was really interesting to see. I can see here Mike Norris, friend of the show, Mike Norris. Good to see you, Mike. Like leaders wondering why they can't measure ROI of the data investment. Wonder why? Yeah. Well, that's part of what they actually were talking about. So Gartner had this theory that was very interesting, and I'm curious what people think of this. The difference between short-term tactical ROI and long-term strategic ROI that they were kind of preaching that you need to figure out. So what they said was like short-term tactical ROI is the really classical stuff that we think of, like revenue, cost reduction, productivity increases, the things that you first think of when you think of ROI, right? And that's like just, did my data project lead to more money? Now, Gartner was kind of arguing, and you see this in the chart on the right, that that there's been a shift to long-term strategic ROI, making up the value of S&P 500 companies in this case. And that stuff is like fuzzier, like know-how, your brand value, how innovative are you as a company. And so part of what they were arguing, I think, is like you need to use your data program to drive long-term strategic ROI, what they called financial influencing
Interesting.
Metrics versus direct financial metrics. Now, what I'll say is, like, I think a lot of data teams actually, it would be nice to be able to tie your data projects to financial influencing metrics, but like they can't even tie their data projects to the short-term tactical metrics that you see here, right? So even that would be a big win for a lot of data teams. Just being able to show like exactly how your project generated revenue, I think it would be really important and a step in the right direction. And I would advocate that you you need to be able to show that. Now, Gartner is saying maybe that's not enough anymore. You need to be able to show how your data projects enhance the brand. And that's awesome. But like if you can't show revenue, I mean, I would start there.
Yeah. Like Bill Inman told everyone at Data Day conference, like every question needs, the question would be, everything you're doing is, how does this make my company money? And how can I prove that this makes my company money? Right. So I mean, yeah. So it's interesting to say that like Bill Inman's timeless wisdom seems to be the hot news right now. 1992 is 2022.
Yeah. Right. I mean, it's an evergreen topic, and the only reason I think that it became less important over the last decade, and this goes back to our last show, which was awesome. If you haven't checked it out, we did an interview with the tech bros, Lauren Ballack and Mary McCarthy. But like money was flowing, like interest rates were low and money was flowing. And so there just wasn't as much premium put on your ability to show how your data project had a concrete contribution to the short-term or long-term financial outlook. Because the money was flowing, right? And so you just didn't worry about it like you do now. But now you're going to have to worry about it again. And I think Bill would say, well, it was probably a mistake to ever stop worrying about that sort of thing, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. So Mike says, doesn't this mean that leaders have it backwards, trying to show value afterwards versus understanding before starting the projects? Yeah, well, I think that's a big part of it, is a lot of projects, to your point, Mike, were started because someone high up went to a conference. So I heard a story at the conference that I can share with you. I won't share who it was, but they were saying that, they were in a situation where someone in leadership went to a conference, or they did a study rather, of what were their competitors spending on data. And they realized that their competitors were spending like 3x on data teams versus what they were spending. So they just pumped up the data team budget to match that without having any strategic idea of like what the value was actually going to be that was delivered. Man. And that's the type of thing you can do, when you're a huge company and the interest rates you're getting on your debt are like 0%.
Yeah, basically. It's free or negative interest, who knows,
Well, yeah, yeah. I mean, for a lot of that time, there was like I can remember the days of like negative real interest on treasuries, right? That we're not that
Yeah.
far away from that period.
No. No. So, Ryan, did you meet anyone cool there? Like
Yeah,
who were the let me make them put in more business terms. Did you meet any interesting industry leaders or thought leaders at the conference that you'd like to share any insights they may have shared with you?
yeah, yeah, sure. Well, first of all, there were some super data fans at the
Oh, this is
conference, so
cool.
this was a different experience for me. There were a couple people who watched the show who were at the conference. You can see here. Jacob Little with Axis Group was a big fan, and I managed to give him one of the coveted and rare Super Data Brothers shirts.
We may be having a giveaway at one of these upcoming live streams, so keep tuning in. You may earn yourself a Super Data Brothers t-shirt.
Yeah, we're going to start raffling these things off once we sort out the integration between our streaming software and raffling, something that'll let us raffle out to people who put in comments. So Super Data fans, Jacob Little, and then Sonny Rivera, who's with ThoughtSpot, also fan of the show. Always really good to connect with people who know the show. And then, just people who I know really well. So like Rachel Sue from IBM. Rachel and I go way back. It was great to run into her. I was there, of course. Shout out to Good Data, who makes a really exciting BI platform that we'll talk about, I'm sure, at some point during today's live stream for having me down. But overall, the conference as a whole attracts a lot of kind of those types of people. Now, it is Gartner's conference, so there are a lot of really interesting thought leaders, like, say, Joe Reese, for example, who, it's a Gartner conference, and the thought leaders you meet are the Gartner analysts, right? But they do really good work, and I talked to a number of them, and I do think that Gartner has an evolving perspective on this market that because things have been really stable as far as Gartner's message, I think, for the last 5 or 6 years, and I think we're going to see that change really rapidly.
So it's time for a shakeup, is what you're saying?
Yeah, it is time for a shakeup.
You think it's going to be this year, this Magic Quadrant, or you think it's maybe going to be next year's?
No, I don't think it's. I think you will start to see the inkling of a shakeup in this year's Magic Quadrant. So for those of you who don't know, the Magic Quadrant was not released during the conference. I think a lot of us expected that it would be, but it wasn't. And so it's not out yet, the new one, but I think we're going to start to see a shakeup coming, and either next year, meaning 2024, or the year after. I would expect there to be an actual, like, the dots are going to move a lot. It's going to be one of those years, like 2016. Things changed a lot from 2015 to 2016.
Yeah, well, in 2016, like Cognos and Oracle went from like the top right leader quadrant to like bottom left niche player quadrant.
Yeah,
like in a single
exactly.
year. So yeah, that was a pretty big turnaround. So you talking about thinking there's going to be a shakeup, right? What is going to differentiate those who stay in the top quadrant to those who don't, and maybe like what a new, like one of the smaller players in the field, like what should they be focusing on to try to get into that top quadrant, do you think, based on what you saw in this conference?
Yeah, well, I would say so. First of all, to kind of understand the changes that are coming, there was a big focus on what Gartner is calling the franchise model of analytics, which is what you see here. And so this is like nothing. It's not new, this idea, where you have a center of excellence and then you have kind of like decentralized analytics. But I think this phrasing of it, the franchise model, I think is clever, right? Because you understand it like McDonald's, right? You've got McDonald's, which kind of provides all the tools, but then the individual franchisees actually run the restaurants, okay? And so that's kind of what Gartner is advocating as the operating model for your data and analytics practice at your organization. And there are some changes coming in the tooling and the way that we think about the tooling that will drive this forward in a way that I think is going to be more successful than attempts to do this in the past, right? So like this is not a new idea,
No.
but but there's some kind of, first of all, the kind of the data mesh or domain oriented design and data as a product thinking, I think will help drive this forward more successfully. And there are tools that are integrating that thinking into the way that they're built, right? And so that is going to drive kind of what you see here, which are the big trends, kind of the other big trends other than like the ROI crisis in data, which is what you see here. So the big ones that I saw at the conference, and this is being driven into the products themselves, which you'll see. We'll do a review of cool products and that sort of stuff that I saw. And I know everybody loves to talk about the tools, right? Because we all geek out about the tools.
Yeah. If a tool's coming up, you want to be ahead of it.
But really, this is really prescient quote from Chris here. Is like companies that try to solve data problems with technology, most issues are process related, and I believe that too. It's people and like philosophy and process related versus strictly like, oh, we need to buy new tools. And Gartner was not saying the solution to your problems is to buy new tools, right? Like that was not part of the message at this conference. Although what you see here are both processes and features that tools may have, right? So semantics and metrics was a big one, and I know because I know some of the people who we have in the chat here today. That the semantics and metrics debate is a hot one because of the history of where we've been in analytics, right? But this was obviously a very important thing. You saw it with the vendors talking about this and also the Gartner analysts talking about how semantics and metrics fit into your data practice and really enable what you see here, the franchise model, okay? So for those of you who don't know, semantics or metrics, it's like a layer that sits between the database and downstream applications that gives you consistency and governance. That's really it. And so the idea behind it is you define a metric in this layer, and then it can be queried by a BI tool, but it can also be queried, you say you're writing some Python to do some ML AI tasks. You can query it from there. You can be building a data app or a web page and query it from there. And so no matter where you're asking the question for your core metrics, you get the same answer by defining it in a semantic layer. That's kind of the idea behind it.
Gotcha. So is it like a layer of abstraction above maybe your data warehouse?
100%.
Something like that? Okay.
Yeah, that's 100% it. And if you have a semantic layer, like what that allows you to do is you don't have to materialize, like if you have no semantic layer, you actually materialize in Snowflake, let's say, a lot of the data combinations that you might want, right? So you're going to materialize revenue and, all the time, say the levels of a time dimension, if we're thinking about dimensional data, right? So year, quarter, month, day, right? We're actually going to materialize that in a table somewhere. And what ends up happening is you materialize it in a bunch of tables instead of in just one, right? The semantic layer allows you to like do that relationship without having to materialize it, basically. So it's like a virtual. I don't want to use the term virtualization, although that often fits into these things. But it's like if you think of your data layer cake, it's the layer that can allow you to combine metrics and attributes on the fly without having to actually build them materially in your database.
Gotcha. So it's kind of like it's like a model. It's like you do your modeling in the semantic layer instead of at the endpoint, right?
Yeah.
Instead of doing it at the endpoint or creating a single materialized view, which is kind of your modeling that you report off of, you instead of have this tool that sits on a layer above, so that way you can point to it from, I assume, any tool that it supports, right? So that's kind of the idea behind it.
That's the idea. So in the BI context, you might have a lot of big companies have 3 or 4 BI tools. So you might have, imagine you do a semantic layer, and then whether you're using Tableau or Cognos or Power BI or whatever, you ask a question, you get the same answer.
Nice. Okay, so that's a big trend that people like. So what about some of these other big trends you have laid out here?
So there was a big one like data ops, just like software dev techniques coming to data and analytics is code, and Git and Kubernetes and all that software development stuff, right?
Yeah.
That is infusing the analytics world. Composability, this idea So I did a poll on LinkedIn actually of my LinkedIn followers. Do you know what composability means in the context of data and analytics? And I got a bunch of people who responded with comments, and only one person got it right. But I think this is going to be a big thing in the upcoming few years. It's just the idea of modularity. Like you have Lego bricks of capabilities, and you can assemble them however you want for whatever the use case happens to be. That was a big thing. GPT and just data science and AI in general, and their collision with business intelligence and analytics was a big thing. And also data storytelling. This is just an evergreen concept, right? We talk about it a lot. It's the idea of building something that is more useful than just a dashboard, right? How do you actually move people with data?
Gotcha. So I want to talk about composability a little bit more.
Yeah.
Because you mentioned like the modular approach to data, where like you have all these different components and you can combine them how they want. But like another thing I've heard people complaining about is they have so many tools, right? So like a symptom is a symptom of composability that you now have, instead of having one or two tools you use for your data stack, you now have countless, and you don't even know what's going on. So like, could you talk a bit about that?
Yeah, so that's actually a really interesting question. So there's kind of a couple ways. So first of all, one of the trends that I see coming is the return of the platform, right? That's the big tool that does a lot of stuff. We've been in an era where to your point, you at the enterprise level, a lot of what BI platforms used to do has been pushed down into the database, the data layer, and you're just slapping. This is kind of the Tableau way, right? You push a lot of stuff to the data layer, and then you might do these extracts into the BI tool, and you just visualize them, right? And that's kind of where the value of that supply chain Tableau era came from, is that was fast, and so the speed delivered the value, right? When it comes to the composability piece, I think there's a lot of emerging BI tech that you buy a platform that gives you all the pieces. So you're not going to have to buy, like you think about the modern data stack, which I don't think has totally permeated the enterprise level like it has kind of startup and mid-market and tech companies. The modern data stack approach, of course, is there's all these startups and they just offer a piece. So you think about composability in terms of the modern data stack. Well, you might be buying, an ETL tool and a reverse ETL tool and a data blending tool and two visualization tools and a data catalog and a semantic layer, and all those are individual tools, right? That's kind of what people do at the startup level, because you're paying a data engineer $300,000 and they have the skills to integrate all that stuff together, okay? Mm-hmm. There's this emerging class of big BI platforms that I think are very interesting that give you, again, harken back to the Cognos days, say, where they have a lot of capabilities and they allow you to combine those capabilities in a composable fashion. Okay, so you're not going to have to buy 25 tools to get the benefits of composability, because of this emerging class of analytics and business intelligence platforms that are going to give you composability in a single purchase with a single vendor.
Gotcha. So there was some good representation there from that. Do you have, are there any specific tools or vendors that
we can. So if we want to talk about specific tools and vendors, let me kind of talk about kind of the trends that I saw with the tools and vendors and that sort of thing. And what this is really, it lined up, what Gartner's saying lined up nicely with what I've been saying for once, which was nice. I'm not used to that. But here you can, before I talk about the vendors, it's just kind of like the vibe or what Gartner was saying. It had a lot boiled down to the return of governance, okay? Semantics plus composability plus data ops. So this is metrics layers, right? And data modeling plus the modular piece plus data ops, kind of that, all of that combined is the modern version of governance. This is the modern version of what Cognos and Business Objects were giving you and still give many customers, right? And we don't want to talk about them in the past tense. They're still very widely used tools.
Yeah, I still use them.
Exactly. This is like the modern version of that. So that really, kind of gets to what were the key trends that Gartner talked about in this, in terms of BI tools, right? The key trends impacting analytics and BI platforms. So the new MQ didn't come out. In fact, I'll tell you, at the MQ presentation, they kind of talked about trends and all this other stuff, and then they were like, and here's the MQ, and they flashed up a picture, and it was last year's MQ. But they didn't say that, so it was very confusing to people. You have to be a real like BI nerd to have memorized the MQ to be able to recognize it on site, which I have. And so, but anyway, like this is where kind of the key trends impacting these platforms that you see here. And so you see what this means in terms of the tooling, really came down to like the rise of concerns of analytics on analytics governance. And we talk about kind of the trends, right? Here you can see metric stores, analytics catalogs. These are things that we used to do a lot. Like this was how we did BI in 2008. We didn't call it a metric store, but like Cognos had Framework Manager and Transformer. So OLAP was very active back then. And then all that went away, and now it's coming back. And Gartner is recognizing that it's coming back, which I think leads to the kind of what your question was really about, was the vendors. And my prediction for like what I saw and what's coming for the BIMQ. So it was very interesting. They mentioned in the actual BIMQ presentation, they actually talked about some things they've considered, which is either combining BI and data science and AI into a single MQ, or splitting BI into front-end viz and BI platform as two separate things. Which I think is very interesting because the leaders in the MQ right now are all BI viz companies. Like that's predominantly what they offer. Tableau, Microsoft, and Qlik really are foremost thought of as
front-end,
providing
basically
that visualization layer.
Yeah.
So that's my prediction, is the rise of the new platforms. Tools that combine what was classically called Mode 1 and Mode 2 are going to be coming back into vogue. There are now lots of startups that are trying to do this, that are building big platforms again. For a long time, every startup was a viz tool, and they would niche down and niche down and niche down to like, we're the type of viz tool that does this particular type of viz really well, right? This way of like analysts building dashboards, and like, what's our flavor of analysts building dashboards? Now they're starting.
Niches are covered, right?
Yeah, exactly. They're starting to do big stuff again. I think what's going to happen, we're going to see the fall of the viz-only vendor on the Magic Quadrant, and the rise of the new platform, okay? And Gartner specifically said, and this goes back to something that you and I have talked about, our very first Super Data show was, is Tableau dead? Gartner said, their words, not mine, that there's huge pressure on Tableau, it's too expensive at scale, and they specifically called that out, okay? So this all tells me something's changing. I think there's going to be a big shakeup, not in the 2023 MQ, but the 2024 MQ. And we've got a comment here. So it says LinkedIn user, because the StreamYard LinkedIn integration is not great, but this is Bob Hardway. So thank you for the comment, Bob. BI is dead, long live analytics. Yeah, I mean, I think that, there's a movement towards these kind of bigger analytics platforms and away from just providing a front end, and of course, Bob is with Starburst. Starburst, of course, is a very cool vendor that provides a really cool kind of SQL. I don't want to call it just a SQL query engine, but they do some really cool things, and you should check them out. Okay.
Gotcha.
So you asked me what tools were cool. Here we go.
Yeah. Okay.
The preface to this is I didn't go to everyone's booth. I didn't see every tool. I didn't talk to everyone. I know, shock. So if you really love a tool,
angry comments,
or you're right, so like, I didn't see everything, and so if you take that for what it is. But these are the top tools that I saw. Okay, we're gonna start with good data. When we talk about the return of the platform, okay, good data is trying to do all of the stuff that we've talked about up to this point. Okay, so it's metrics layer, it's composability, it's analytics as code, data ops. You deploy it anywhere. They have a cloud version, but it's super modern. You can deploy it on Kubernetes, wherever, on-prem, in whatever cloud you want. Okay, takes an analytics as engineering approach. So this is what I think of as a super modern, like a super modern engineering-based, code-based approach to business intelligence and analytics. And what I think is really cool about this approach is the way that it scales, okay? So like when you take this code-based approach, when you've architected the code appropriately, you can make huge environment-wide changes by just editing a few lines of code versus having to go through a UI and it might take you days or weeks. Like I think about in the past when I've had to do reorgs, for example. I'm working somewhere and the very first place I was on a BI team ever 12 years ago was at a company where we did a reorg every March. Every March, we changed the org chart. And it would take like 4 to 6 weeks to update it all to make sure that our BI didn't break. Whereas if we had an analytics as code approach, it would really be like dramatically less effort, right? Because we would just be changing some code in a few places, and then all those changes would automatically propagate through the environment instead of having to go through the UI and go into every report. And in every report, change the filters from referencing this to that, right? If we parameterized it in the code, it would be change a JSON file, entire environment updates based off the JSON file. That's why I love this approach, okay?
Interesting. So if you had different, like security for different departments or something like that, it's like using this approach, then would it be like you update something in there, like there's an org change, like a bunch of people moved around, or this was split into 2 different ones. You updated it like at the low level inside like this good data tool, and then like it just propagates up, and like now people are seeing their new folders like automatically without having to like send in requests to remove people around. Is like, am I understanding that correctly?
That's 100% correct, right? Now, of course, like it's an engineering task, so you have to set it up properly, and you have to be comfortable with code and Python and React and that sort of stuff. But so it's different. A lot of BI teams are not ready for this, but this is honestly the direction I think things are heading, right? We're going to bring on these software development practices into analytics, because what that's going to enable us to do, I think, is this. Like, I think we have to be able to embrace analytics as code and, modern cloud-based deployments and Kubernetes and data ops and, be versioning in Git and do blue-green deployments and all this software dev stuff. That's what's going to enable us to deliver the analytics franchise or the data mesh or the data fabric or whatever particular flavor of it.
Exactly.
I'm personally a data mesh stan. I will admit it. I love Zhamak, and the data mesh idea I think is the winner. But all of these things are aiming for the same thing. But we're not going to be able to get there with old school, heavily UI-based ways of managing analytics, right? If we embrace code, if we embrace metrics, if we embrace composability, then we can have a central team managing the code, managing the pieces, managing the metrics, but letting each satellite or domain or franchise run at their own speed and use some of their own tooling, because we can integrate it with the code. We can integrate it with the metrics, right?
Interesting.
So that good data, very cool. Tellius was also another tool that I saw. The thing I appreciated about them is they are, again, taking a big bite out of the apple. This is not, we're a viz tool. This is, we're trying to give you data ingestion, transformation, metrics, visualization, DSAI, data science and artificial intelligence, and natural language query in a single platform, right? And they had a really slick interface. So they were doing it very well. I mean, I went to the booth, I looked at the left-hand side where they had, it's like the left-hand side of the software, they have all the features. And I just went, yep. Oh, you guys do almost everything. And I appreciate that. Coming out of the supply chain era where what we were focused on was how can we make the most flexible viz tool for analysts, right? This is a tool that's trying to unite data engineers, data scientists, and BI use cases into a single place. Okay. And so that, again, it's the return of the big platform and the end of the Viz era of BI. Not that Viz is going away, it's still important. Although I saw some very interesting ChatGPT things that made me question, like, what does Viz look like in the future?
That's interesting. Oracle.
This was surprising to me.
Top tool, Oracle.
Oracle? What? So I stopped by the Oracle booth, and they actually had a really impressive suite of cloud capabilities that were tightly integrated. And it was, the UIs were good. It was easy to get to all the capabilities and see how to integrate them, which has not been the case in the past for Oracle or many of these other big vendors, right? Like AWS. Integrating AWS's stack is harder than what I saw of Oracle's. Now, I haven't done it, so, right? But just what they showed me was very cool. The Oracle Data Viz tool has really come a long way. It was very impressive, easy to use, and had a lot of nice features, right? With like the ability to generate narratives, its ability to suggest visualizations to you. Many BI tools can do this, but Oracle's implementation of it was surprisingly good from a UX perspective, right? So really, when I say I was impressed with Oracle, what I mean is that they really had a nice UX that I thought combined classic data viz use cases with kind of DSAI use cases in a single package that was easy to navigate, and I think end users will like. And you can't say that about a lot of what you might call legacy vendors, right? And so I put them as a top tool because I was pleasantly surprised by it, right? Not that the suite of capabilities as a whole were mind blowing, but just they were really well done in a way that I didn't expect.
Gotcha.
Now this is not a BI tool, but this is my fourth top tool, seller data. So these guys are very new to the US, and this had one of the clearest value props I've ever heard. Okay. And it was just that it has the highest IPC or instructions per clock, and therefore best performance of any SQL engine. Now, that was basically it. Every tick of the CPU, they can get more instructions into the tick. There you go, right? That's just a fundamental. If you understand what it means, you're like, oh, okay, cool. So you're faster, and here's why you're faster, right? The other cool thing about them is you can move data into their engine, or you can leave it where it is. So it's kind of like Snowflake plus Starburst. But unlike Snowflake, it's not cloud only, so you can deploy this however you want. And they also pitch themselves as cheaper than Snowflake. So
that's good, because one thing I've been hearing talk online is that a lot of big companies, some of them are kind of turning against cloud where they can, right? Yeah. Because they've all their stuff on some cloud service, and it's costing them $3 million a year, and if it would cost them $750,000 to have their own warehouse and hire their own people to manage it, right? So was there any talk of that, at the conference? Yeah,
so there was definitely, just in talking with people at the conference, when it would come up, this idea of like, wait till you see your Snowflake bill in year 3 sort of deal, was certainly a topic of conversation. And I think there are companies, so there are situations where you have multiple clouds, like because of M&A, mergers and acquisitions, very commonly, right? We standardize on AWS. We bought a company that does Azure. We bought another company that does Google. And so the ability to do multi-cloud is actually IBM's. That's why IBM bought Red Hat, right? The ability to do multi-cloud and on-prem. So there's also this, like, for companies that have the capability, I think they value the ability to deploy like what seller data can do, right? Or good data, or many of these tools. Like they deploy on Kubernetes, and you can put it in your own VPC. You can run it in your own data center that you manage. So it's definitely talk of that. And you can see here, Mike's perspective, cloud databases equal big money and limited ROI. And I think there's an element of truth to that, right? Like cloud databases allow you to scale quickly. That's the great thing about them, is so much is being managed by the vendor that you can scale quickly. But the flip side to it is like oftentimes people really, the costs get out of control. And that's that year 2, year 3 on Snowflake, right? And that's also something that Lauren mentioned in our last episode, was just like, the ROI of Snowflake's ROI is shockingly high because of people, because of that escalating costs over time that people see with these cloud databases. And so something like seller data just gives you the ability to manage that yourself if you have the skills in a way that you can't if you're just relying on a cloud vendor.
Gotcha.
The other interesting thing I'd point out about seller data, so they're very unknown, but they have huge scale and proven ROI in China. This is actually a Chinese company. So it's an open source database called StarRocks, and then like seller data is the commercial side of the open source database. And so, you just talk about like, if you have huge scale, I think that's big data in China, like their scale of data is obviously huge, ginormous because of, it's
but
just
more than 1 billion people.
Exactly. I mean, and so, so this has been deployed at like 200 or 300 companies in China, and now they're coming to the US. So I thought this one was very interesting too. Honorable mentions, just like lots of other cool stuff. Microsoft is all GPT. If you're curious, the direction of Power BI, it seems to be GPT is the direction of Power BI.
Well, they invested how much? Like more than $1 billion, like something crazy.
It was like lots of billions.
It was like 10 billion or something,
right?
Into OpenAI. So like, they're Microsoft. I imagine they'll be pushing hard on that, and it seems like it's going to be a winner. I mean, based on what I've used of ChatGPT, we'll see where that goes, man.
I mean, it's impressive, and what they showed was impressive. But what I will say is, like, Microsoft's presentation was all videos; they didn't live demo.
Yeah, that'll do it.
Right. So
all NLP you've seen in every BI tool for the past 5 years ended up being so. Looks great in the video.
Looks great. Well, and I've demo, right? I have been a sales engineer where I'm demoing an NLG, NLQ BI feature, and I know that what I'm demoing is not going to work great in the real world. You know?
But
right,
great to demo.
I've done that before. So ThoughtSpot had a good GPT. ThoughtSpot had a good GPT integration. It was because they've had their own. That's their whole shtick is the NLG, NLQ BI. But their GPT integration, basically, they put GPT on top of their existing keyword-based NLG, NLQ. So, like, because they've built a lot of, like, explainability, lineage, and, like, a really good SQL engine. Whereas, GPT can generate, like, really bad SQL. So what they did is they just layered GPT on top of what they already had so that, you're getting... that you're getting good SQL and lineage and all the ThoughtSpot features, but you're interacting with it through GPT rather than kind of a keyword-based type ahead query builder.
Gotcha. And I just want to pipe in one thing here for the audience. If you have any questions, I think we've got maybe like 13 minutes left or so. So if you've got any questions, and I see some people are putting their questions down there. If you got any questions or comments, just put them in right now, and so we can tackle them at the once we're done going over some of these tools, we can kind of tackle any questions at the tail end. Yeah,
this is kind of this is the end of the tools overview. I know people really like to talk about that stuff. I'll just one more thing. There was a great presentation by Georgia O'Callaghan about consolidating tools that I thought really gave extremely actionable, easy to follow directions on how to consolidate tools and why to consolidate tools. Realistic as someone who's done it, right? So I just run over those really quickly. Lift, like her perspective, and I've seen this too, lift and shift doesn't work. You need to, if you're going to consolidate tools, I know many of you probably work at an enterprise where you've got who knows how many BI tools. I did a BI rationalization project one time from a client where we uncovered, I can't remember, like 20 or 22 BI tools or something like that. It's just madness. So you can't just lift and shift. Don't look like, okay, we're like screenshot dashboard A, and then we're going to recreate it exactly as it is, from tool A to tool B. Like,
that
don't
could be
do
a nightmare.
You need to rethink what you're doing, right? You need to take the opportunity to ditch what doesn't work and refactor, reform, and do the rebirth of BI at your organization. Don't try to just replicate so it looks the same in two tools. She also advocated that slow and it's like BI migrations are like barbecue. Slow and low beats turning the heat all the way up. If you're trying to like slam in a migration from tool A to tool B, you're going to spend a ton of money. You're going to make mistakes. You're probably going to bring in an outside vendor. Mm-hmm. And you're going to spend $280 an hour versus doing it slow and low.
Yeah,
right?
Probably replicate your old problems too.
You will replicate your old problems, right? The second you decide to ditch a tool, you cease all development in that tool, like immediately. People often don't do this. You'd be surprised. They say, oh, business objects, we're sunsetting business objects, but we're also still building stuff in it. No. The metrics layer can help you with this. So if you back important calculations out of BI into metrics, at that point, you're front-end agnostic with those metrics, right? So not only have you helped yourself with this migration, but all future migrations. And then finally, don't sweat it, right? Like, it's great to totally get rid of a tool, but let's say you've got a tool that does classic paginated reporting, and like for regulatory purposes, you can't get rid of all paginated reports. Fine. Migrate out what you can, renegotiate a lower ongoing cost with the vendor, and then let those existing regulatory reports continue on as they are, right? Just don't sweat it. Do what you can. Okay, so with that said,
gotcha.
That's kind of the tooling overview.
Yep. So piping with consolidating tools, don't we have a show coming up on that?
Yes. In fact, I think it's April 20th.
April 20? I'm not sure. Yeah. Hold on. Let me look at the calendar real quick.
Yeah. So we're gonna have a show talking about like the what we view as the ideal mixture of BI tools, not necessarily which
April
tools
20th.
you should buy, but which type and how they fit together.
Yeah. Is that the yep?
I think it's April 20th.
Yeah, that's April 20th. Yep, we're talking about the tools. Yep, so check it out.
So one thing here, Mike asks, did Gartner try and explain the delay in the MQ and the critical capability? Not that I saw. So if they did, I didn't hear it. I just heard that it was delayed, and that was basically it. It definitely was weird during the MQ presentation not to have the MQ, right? Mm-hmm. And it was also a little strange when they showed the Magic Quadrant, but it was last year's Magic Quadrant, but they didn't say this is last year's Magic Quadrant, which I found I was a little perturbed by it. But no, I don't know. I don't know why it was delayed. I would imagine it's not been delayed by much. It should be out soon, but I really expected to have it at the conference. It would have driven a lot of conversation at the conference. I mean, I will say, and Gartner actually said this, that picture, that image drives so much of the conversation around BI. But even Gartner says, read the report and read the critical capabilities report. Like, actually read the Magic Quadrant report and read the critical capabilities rather than just look at the picture. And now I know, like, the picture, this is just read the report. You will find, if you read the report, that what they say about the tools and what you see in the image not that they disagree with one another, but just you get a fuller understanding, right? Of like, you might look at a dot and say, oh, this tool's not very good. And then you read what it says and you're like, actually, this tool sounds perfect for me, right? So read the report.
This is a good one.
Here we've got.
Here, I'll take this one. I joined late. Sorry if it's already covered. Any mention of AWS Quicksight and roadmap provided by Amazon on this tool? I'll let you pipe in after me, Ryan. But good that you're questioning. You're asking that question because next week we're actually doing a tool, kind of a tool review and a deep dive of AWS Quicksight, where we'll be reviewing kind of the tool overall, what it's good for, maybe what it's not good for, what the community looks like, and what the trajectory of the tool looks like, and also what Amazon is kind of planning for it. So tune in next week, Thursday, same time, and we'll answer all those questions. Now, I don't know if you saw anything about Quicksight at the conference, Ryan.
Yeah, no, I didn't. I didn't get a chance to sit down and really talk with the Quicksight team that was there. So I can't provide any further information on Quicksight other than to echo what Eric said, which is next week at this time we will be doing a Quicksight deep dive. And that's one thing. Let us know, what tools do you want to deep dive on?
For sure.
Because we're going to try to do, going forward, maybe 1 out of every 4 episodes ish, just a deep dive on a tool, where the way we're going to structure it, I think, is one of us will learn the tool, the other one will learn nothing, and then that person will go into it blind. So it'll be like, real reactions, real questions. Can it do this? Can it do that? Oh, that was cool. Oh, that sucked. Right. As kind of a plan here. And so, what else? So let's see. We've got this question from Tony. Great overview of key messages from the conference. Appreciate your insight. Need to combine data viz, fully modern platform with MLAI focused on business outcomes and having a solid data platform strategy. That was a huge, really, Tony, that was a big part of it, was just like business value, and how to focus on business outcomes. In fact, Gartner had this, they had this, I don't think I talked about this slide, but what they call the enterprise value equation was really like their guide to how to do that. Okay. So the enterprise value equation is what you see here. And it's like, you focus on stakeholder priorities, you determine what the value enablers are, right? And then you identify the stakeholder impacts and the return to your organization. And the thing I like about this chart is it's circular, right? It feeds from one to the other. And that's really what we advocate at Super Data Brothers, is like the supply chain of analytics, the previous era, was a one-way street of insights. Mm-hmm. What we need to build is something that is focused on delivering business value and is circulatory. So you're always adapting, you're always changing. The new insights you develop through BI feed back into a metrics layer that go into AI ML and go into data apps, right? It's a circulatory system that both delivers new insights and cleans out junk. And that's kind of, I think, part of what Gartner is showing here. Here we've got Pratik says, wow, a lot about BI. Yeah, this is kind of Gartner's, it's a combination of, it's a very BI focused conference, and also I'm a BI guy, right? Yeah. So like when I had 10 sessions that I could go to, and one of them was about like delivering business value with analytics or how to migrate analytics tools or something like that, those are the things that I would go to versus data science, because I'm not a data scientist. And so there are lots of awesome data scientists out there that you can follow on LinkedIn who have great shows, and I would check them out. But that's an area where like I don't have anything important to add to the data science conversation. I'm not going to pretend I can.
Yeah. Yeah, we're kind of BI guys first and foremost.
Yeah, BI, data warehouse, data engineering. Yep,
that side of things.
So here's implementing Quicksight. Feels Quicksight is combining the best features of Tableau and Power BI together. Especially licensing looks similar to Power BI. So that's what we're going to talk about in depth next week. But yeah, Quicksight is very interesting.
Too.
One interesting thing about Quicksight, and you can see, it's actually Mike brings this point up here. Now he says Quicksight is slow moving as far as how quickly the platform is advancing. But he says recently they did a reporting focus. So that's actually a very, when we talk about old is new again, like that's one of the things that I saw at the Gartner conference is a lot of ideas, things that I used to do, like semantic layers. People are using the term OLAP again.
It's a miracle.
It's now they're not talking about OLAP cubes, but they're talking about semantics and that sort of stuff. But they're using the term OLAP, which I hadn't heard in a long time. Part of what's old is new again that I'm very interested in is that reporting piece, right?
Yep.
The classic paginated burst report. The only tools that do that are our legacy tools, our Cognoses and our business objects and that sort of thing. Amazon recently added it to Quicksight. That's the first new paginated reporting tooling that I've seen, I don't know, in 20 years. I mean, it's been a long time.
I mean, that's one of the main reasons we're reviewing it, because otherwise you would say like, yeah, this does a lot of the same stuff other tools do, but like adding that paginated reporting, I think, and you'll see next week how successful they are at it or not. But yeah, like that, I think that paginated reporting could be a differentiator for Quicksight, especially if it's well done.
Yeah, right. And that's one thing I'd throw back to you. Like, where do you think, because sometimes I bring up paginated reporting and I get pushback from people. They're like, why are you talking about this? Nobody does this anymore. And it's often people in the startup space who I know. And then I say, well, I know some very large companies that do very large, complex paginated reporting. They do very large and complex paginated reporting. And they still see a lot of value in it. So very interesting to see Amazon embracing that in a way that other people have not. And I'm curious if we will see those capabilities come to other BI and analytics platforms, or if it's kind of a one-off. I don't know. I haven't heard that anybody else is building it, but I'm very interested to see what happens with Amazon's implementation and whether or not that ends up getting viewed as a differentiator for them.
Yeah.
All right, we're at the top of the hour. We've got a lot of good questions. If you have any, we can run just a couple minutes over. If there's anything that you're dying to know, get her in now.
We can keep on talking.
Get it in now. Still a big need in some regulated sectors. Absolutely. Paginated reporting, and it's still being done in a lot of places. It doesn't get done at startup because most startups are lightly regulated and they move super fast, right? But they don't have long-lived reports. They get created for the need now, and in a month, the whole company may have pivoted to a different business model, and that report is now useless. Big enterprises, regulated enterprises, healthcare, pharma, utility, they have paginated reports that are useful for a decade or longer.
Gotcha. So, Ryan, we'll give people just a couple minutes to get any questions in. We've been talking about the conference for the past hour. I just want you two things to cover real quick. What was the number one thing that wowed you? Right, that you saw something you're like, whoa, and then just give for the end of the video before we sign off, what was the key takeaway? What's the summary of this conference? What is it? What does this mean?
Yeah. What wowed me? I mean, the biggest wow factor was definitely, as far as just pure emotional reaction, like whoa, was definitely the GPT stuff. It was Microsoft. What Microsoft showed to GPT, it was what ThoughtSpot showed, right? It was the most I can't believe what I'm seeing.
Yeah.
Do I think that was the most valuable? I don't think so, right? I think the value comes in what you see here, the enterprise value equation, the idea of embracing the franchise model, the data mesh, the data fabric. Again, I'm a data mesh fan, but whatever you want to call it, right?
The data washcloth.
Yeah, exactly. Whatever it is, the tooling, what I saw of the tooling and how that has evolved to support a centrally provisioned distributed analytics practice is, I think the tooling is there to do it in a way that we haven't had it in the past. But the biggest wow factor was the GPT stuff. Just the most like jaw drop, whoa, was the GPT stuff. The big takeaway from the conference, I think, is that you need to develop a practice that is able to identify and deliver business value. You've always needed to do that, but that need was masked by low interest rates for almost a decade. But that is changing fast. And if you can't say how what you're doing is contributing to the bottom line, I think your data practice is going to have a rough couple of years. And the way you do that is by really understanding what drives your business users and how you can provide them with the metrics and capabilities that help them win. Okay? That was the big takeaway from this. And I think that always needed to be our focus. But more than ever, I think it is critical for your data team to be able to concretely say how you drive that process. And it cannot be, look at how many reports we have. Look at how much data we process. Look at how many users we have in our environment. Those are vanity metrics that are not going to cut it when the CFO says, why are we spending $5 million on this team, right? You need to be able to turn around and say that $5 million drove X, Y, and Z specifically. So start figuring out what that is now. And I think the biggest way that you're able to deliver that ROI is by embracing this centrally provisioned, centrally provisioned metrics and analytics components where you're working in partnership with the different satellites or domains to make sure that they're moving at the speed that delivers value for them, right? That's at the end of the day, fundamentally what the conference was all about. It was about ROI.
Nice. All right, I think we're at the end here. So before we go, I think we should do a quick shout out to our sponsor for this video. Who is our sponsor, Ryan?
It was us, the Super Data Brothers.
Data Brothers. Right now, what can the Super Data Brothers do for someone?
Yeah, so if you're trying to navigate this space, you are trying to sort this out. How do I build an open, how do I build a data and analytics franchise model? How do I identify ROI? What does the circulatory model of analytics look like, where we're generating value and distributing it across the organization? That is what we can help you figure out. So reach out to us and we will help you get there.
All right. So, show is the same time every week, 12 p.m. Eastern time, every Thursday. So tune in and you can check us out. We've got some interesting topics coming up next week. Quicksight deep dive, where Quicksight is in the industry, where it's going, what it's good for, what it's not bad for. And then next week I think we have an interview with someone, do we?
Yeah, Elif from AtScale. So if you're interested in the semantic layer, AtScale is a very interesting semantic layer company that has a really cool set of capabilities. So we'll be talking with her about AtScale. She also spent a long time as one of the head product people at Click. So this is someone with deep BI expertise. I'm really looking forward to talking to her.
Awesome. All right. Well, I'd like to thank everyone for tuning in. I hope it was useful for you. We had fun doing it. We have fun doing it every week. So hope it was good on your end.
Yep. Yep. Until next week, we are the Super Data Brothers.
All right.
Take care, everybody.